So, what's the definition of insanity? Well, it's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
If I want different results, I've got to experiment. There's no good changing my thinking. I've got to change how I behave. And maybe a good place to start is with my behaviour.
Hi, and welcome to the Mavericks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Roy, and this is the place to be to become your best self, do work you love, and create life on your terms. On this podcast, we aim to speak to Mavericks who inspire us. We want to get the wisdom and the insight from their story to give you the clarity, courage, and confidence that you need to make your mark on the world. So this week's episode is all about change, and I don't know about you, but let's face it, as human beings, we can find change really difficult. I'm really curious as to how we can make it easier. So I decided to invite on a friend of ours from Brighton, Ray Richards, to talk about this. Ray is a maverick in his own right, but he's particularly been fascinated with this whole thing himself. So he set up a company called Do Something Different. And Do Something Different is all about using technology to make change easier by breaking it down into bite-sized chunks, or what he calls do's, to help us hit those big, hairy, audacious goals we all want. So on this episode, Ray talks about what it actually takes to hit those goals, to bring people along with you and to be successful. I started off asking Ray to actually tell us a little bit about himself, and here's what he's got to say.
Well, I've done lots of different things, which I suppose wasn't by design initially. Mm-hmm. It just happened because I wasn't particularly good at anything. So I tried lots of things, and at some point realised that actually that was my area of expertise, that I knew a little bit about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that's why I was so attracted to the Do Something Different methodology, which was developed by Professor Ben Fletcher and Professor Karen Pine, who are my co-founders of Do Something Different. Mm-hmm. So when I saw it, I just thought, wow, okay, that sort of explains quite a bit. And their research really tells us that the most successful people in life are those that have got the greatest level of behavioural flexibility. Okay. So that means they can behave in lots of different ways. They can be assertive or unassertive. Yep. They can trust people or be wary of others. They can take risks or they can play it safe. They can act spontaneously or they can plan. Mm-hmm. And having those options is really important, because sometimes it's good to be assertive. When you've got to leave work and meet your friend for a drink, that's a really good time to be assertive. Yep, and when you're going through, customs at JFK Airport, that's the time to be unassertive.
Absolutely right.
And as a maverick, you've got to take risks. You can't just keep doing the same things, otherwise you'll continue to get the same results. But there are times when it's good to repeat what you've done in the past, because it works. Right,
and I guess the trick there is, as you say, having the flexibility and knowing when and where to flex, as it were.
Yeah, that's right. And but there is a difference between knowing when to do something and doing it.
Right.
A lot of people go on a lot of courses, they spend a lot of money on their personal development, and then they go back to work or back home, and they do exactly what they've always done, and they get the results they've always got. So, it's no good knowing. You've got to actually put it into practice, and that's the trick, and that's the hard bit.
Right. And I know one of the things from the way you approach that, both with your technology and the way you work with clients, is to not necessarily do like the big, huge, overarching changes, but to kind of make change very easy for people, right?
Yeah, I mean, the goal might be quite audacious. Yep. But to achieve it, isn't going to happen in one giant leap. It's going to happen because you take lots of small steps that are in the right direction. Maybe they're not always, but you get used to the idea of doing something different. You get used to the idea of trying something new, and it becomes less daunting, and it becomes a normal way you operate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes complete sense to me. And I know that, obviously when you're a maverick going against a status quo, as it were, that can be quite stressful, and I think that's something a lot of us feel, and I'm sure you've experienced that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard because there are a lot of people looking at you in strange ways, telling you that that's not the way that things are normally done. Maybe sometimes it's because you haven't explained it particularly well.
Yep.
But yeah, you've got to go into the unknown. You've got to do things differently. And swimming against the flow isn't easy.
No. I can relate to that. So, but I know that one of your, well, not even an area of interest, but it's almost like a driving thing these days, is about not just kind of surviving, but how do people thrive? And as you said earlier from the research, you said behavioural flexibility is a key to, happiness and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Underneath behavioural flexibility, there are really 3 core components. The first one is about taking personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Other people aren't going to make it happen for you.
Yeah.
You've got to make it happen for yourself. As I said, you've got to swim against the flow.
Yeah.
You can't do it all the time. It's too tiring to swim against the flow all the time. But every once in a while, you've got to do it. I saw a great example the other day. It was a young mum with her 2-year-old sitting in a cafe.
Yeah.
Next to 6 beach volleyball courts. And she was sitting there and she was surrounded by signs saying, beware of flying volleyballs.
Oh my God.
And, there are beginners being coached and every minute or so, another volleyball lands amongst the tables and chairs. And, within a minute or two of arriving, she started complaining.
Right.
And she was complaining about the fact that her 2-year-old son might get hit by a flying volleyball. And the interesting thing was that she wasn't complaining about the players. She was complaining about the cafe area being open. Her exact words were her words were something along the lines of, it's dangerous. They should have closed off this area. So instead of taking personal responsibility instead of taking her son out of the danger area, she stood there in that dangerous place, complaining that somebody hadn't stopped her going into that area. It was about other people. She wanted other people to take responsibility for her safety, not her taking personal responsibility for her safety. And that's it's a very strange thing.
Yeah.
When you expect, especially when it's a dangerous situation. I mean, it wasn't a dangerous situation, but she thought it was. Very strange. But, it's just because she hadn't got used to taking personal responsibility. She'd got used to other people doing things for her. Right.
And I think also what a stark example. There's also something, isn't there, about certainly in Britain where we are, telling someone to take personal responsibility. Well, this kind of notion of personal responsibility can be quite a harsh one, can't it? It can be almost bad news or.
Yeah, it is interesting, and that it is sometimes seen as an unwillingness to care for other people. But I suppose Mavericks will know better than anyone that if you wait for other people to help you, you could be waiting a very, very long time. In fact, it may never happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly not in the way you want it to happen.
Right. And I guess even in that case, it's not even necessarily that people won't help you, is it? But if you've got to take the responsibility for asking for the help that you need.
Oh, well, yeah. So, one of our favourite do's is to ask for help. If we find out via our app that, they've answered a few questions, if we understand that they're not very good at asking for help, we'll get them to ask for help. That will be the do. It will, say, ask for help, today. About something that's maybe been bothering you for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And the reaction is always great because it's long overdue, that request.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people like being asked.
Oh, God. Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
People like they like to help.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet we let's face it, we all run around kind of thinking, oh, my God, I don't want to impose on anyone or whatever the thought is. But people do, if you ask them, 9 times out of 10, most people love helping, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they feel good about themselves. So personal responsibility was the first of the 3 elements of thriving, you were saying. So what are the other 2?
Okay, the next one is about aligning actions and beliefs.
Right.
And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that, it's no good knowing that you should do something if you don't do it.
Right.
It's no good knowing you should eat 5 fruit and veg a day if you don't do it. Knowing that you need to eat 5 fruit and veg isn't going to change your health.
Yeah.
But eating fruit and veg more often will.
Yeah.
We do it all the time. There's so many people. We were having a conversation just before we started recording about the mobile phones and inability to keep switching tasks every 40 seconds, I think you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we might know that, not sitting, dealing with our emails over the course of an evening when our kids and our family are around us, we might know that's not a good idea, but we're creatures of habit. Our brain, creates habits whenever it can because it saves energy, and we just do it. And we a lot of the time aren't even conscious that we're doing it. Sometimes we are, but we still do it.
Yeah.
We know things aren't good for us, but we still do them.
Yeah.
So if we can align our actions and our beliefs, if we know that, looking at our phone constantly when we're at a meal with our partner is a bad thing, then we got to stop doing it, and we have to take some seemingly ridiculous steps to stop us doing that sometimes. Leave the phone at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lock up the laptop, put it in your work bag, leave it by the front door. Don't worry about the burglars. They're probably not going to break in that night. Leave it by the front door. Don't touch it until the morning.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
Absolutely. And you're almost, that particular instance, you're fighting your neurology, aren't you? Because we've all got addicted to like the hits of dopamine that we get in our brain and all that kind of stuff. But I guess it reminds me of that old saying of, how did it go? You can act your way into a new way of thinking, but you can't think your way into a new way of acting.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we always start with doing. And that's why we make the steps so small that they are doable. Because even the smallest of steps are sometimes, for some people, very difficult.
Yeah.
Me included.
I hear you. I totally hear you. So what we're really talking about there is kind of that word congruence, aren't we? That there is that alignment between thought, belief and action.
Congruence, coherence, there are lots of ways of describing it, but it's just about bringing our thinking and our doing together, our knowing and our behaviours. The list goes on, and there's lots of sayings out there, practice what you preach, don't do as I say, don't do as I do as I say.
Yeah.
The list, actions are louder than words. We've all got it. It's in our vocabulary.
Yeah. And let's face it, one of the ways, if you get stuck, one of the best ways you can do, the best thing you can do is do something, literally.
Absolutely. If you just do something, it doesn't matter. Just do something if you're stuck.
Yeah.
Because if you stand in the middle of the road, you're going to get hit. So go one way or the other.
Yeah. Makes sense. So, personal responsibility is something that, a lot of people in this field talk about, kind of bringing together thoughts and actions. But I'm particularly interested in we've talked before about the third element, but I'm particularly interested in this third element you talk about because I think it's very relevant to Mavericks, as it were. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's simply about embracing the known and the unknown.
Yep.
And having a foot in either camp. If life feels chaotic, you've probably got both feet in the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mavericks probably suffer from this more than a lot of people, because they're happy winging it.
Right.
They're happy thinking on their feet. They're happy being in the unknown. They can cope with it much better than other people. So it sort of becomes their comfort zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you don't have a foot in the known, it verges on chaos, which is stressful.
Yeah.
And it's the bad side of the unknown.
So just for the listeners then, just tell us a little bit more about, because I can grasp what you mean by the known and the unknown here from our conversation in the past. Just give us a little bit more of a definition, if you like, of what you're referring to here about the unknown and the known in terms of what they look like?
Yeah. Okay. So the unknown is when you don't know what to expect, and those people that have a preference for the known, and, we all know them, they're probably members of our family, they're certainly, you've got them amongst your friends, and you've definitely got them amongst your work colleagues.
Yeah.
There are people who just, they like to know what to expect. They like to have a plan. They don't like dealing with the unknown. Because, fair enough, it can be quite frightening, particularly if you haven't experienced it very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you will know. I mean, I've got a friend. I've got a few friends, but I've got one friend in particular who, if we were to suggest going to a pub, he certainly wouldn't want to go to one he hadn't been to before.
Right.
He can't really explain why. He will. He'll make lots of reasons why, but none of them really have any credibility. Yeah. But it's just about, he doesn't know what to expect. He doesn't know what drinks they serve there. He doesn't know how to get there. And that for him is not preferable.
Yeah.
What for him is preferable is going somewhere he knows what to expect.
So there's something here about risk versus there's something about novelty. There's something about newness or unformedness.
Yeah.
Versus certainty, if you like, or uncertainty versus certainty, or something.
Yeah, but the reality, of course, is slightly different to all that, because you can go to a pub, and there'll be different people in there. You can't control everything, but they're just trying to control as much as they can. But once you start getting into, once you step into the unknown once in a while, that fear that you have of stepping into the unknown, it may not disappear, but it certainly doesn't become too burdensome.
Yeah.
You sort of know that you're going to do something different. You're going to go into the unknown. You're going to meet somebody new. You're going to go somewhere new. You're going to fly with a different airline. You're going to go to a different town, whatever it might be. And actually, because you've done it so many times, you know that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
In fact, it's going to be a positive thing. It's not that it's just going to be okay. It's going to be a positive experience. But if you don't do that very often, and if you try and control your life to the extent where you hardly ever do it unless you're forced to do it, then it becomes a more fearful thing.
Yeah.
And it's not the doing of something new, something different that's the problem. It's the fear of it.
And the anticipation.
That's right.
Yeah, makes sense. So if someone goes, I mean, obviously, as you said earlier, too much of either side can be,
a problem.
A problem. So just paint the picture for us of what the extreme of the known, the extreme of the unknown look like.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the extreme end of the known is a rut.
Right.
And for some people it might be as extreme as depression and or anxiety. We had an email from somebody the other day, a young lad he just got to the point where he couldn't step outside of his bedroom.
Wow.
He would, he really, in fact, he said in his email that, he struggled to get out of bed, literally to get out of bed. His meals were being brought to him. I guess he had a loo in his bedroom. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. But it got so extreme, and just because he was fearful of the world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's the extreme.
Right.
That's the extreme, and we're sort of the extreme of the unknown is chaos, where you don't feel as though you've got any firm ground anywhere, and you're just spinning plates constantly.
Yeah.
And that's equally stressful. It's equally stressful. But for wherever you sit, whether you're in a rut or in chaos, the way to move yourself out of that zone is to do something different. is for that young lad, he just started to get out of bed and write something.
Yep.
In a journal. And gradually, he came out of his bedroom for meals, and then he was able to make a trip to the shops, and it ended up in this email. And it's a great thing about doing what we do is that we get these emails once in a while. He said he was volunteering at a local charity.
Oh, awesome.
Because he'd taken those very, very seemingly inconsequential steps.
Yeah.
But, for me, 12 months, if you take me 12 months ago, I was living my life much more in the world of chaos than I would like. And, and what I did to get myself heading in the right direction, it was to start creating some routines and simplify life a bit. And, that worked for me, and and I think it will work for a lot of Mavericks. Your comfort zone when you're a Maverick is the unknown.
Yep.
You're and as I said before, because you're better than other people at doing it. But other people are better at following routines, and routines are really important too. Right. So, but having both. Having a foot in the known and a foot in the unknown is what's important. It's not about one being better than the other. It's about having that balance.
Yeah. Absolutely, that makes sense. And I guess from the Maverick point of view, and this can be kind of either starting a business or going into an organisation or something like that. You do get people who kind of get into that rut of the known, don't you? Of they. Maybe they've been even like a high flyer or something like that, but they've gone part way through their career, and then they suddenly get to a point of like, shit, what am I doing? The proverbial mid-career or midlife crisis, as it were. But and it's kind of they've thought they've been in the world of the unknown, but actually,
well, and they have. They've stepped into the world of the unknown, but it's become the known.
Right. And almost become too much of the known.
Yeah. Because you've constantly got to, have a foot in the unknown.
Yeah.
You can't keep doing, if you keep doing the same things again and again and again, life becomes difficult.
Yeah.
You've got to mix it up a bit. And, you've got a lot of successful people who, think the way they have behaved, the level of behavioural flexibility they've got and they've developed has got them to where they got. And of course it has. But it doesn't mean that another set of behaviours wouldn't have got them there or somewhere else that would have been just as good or better.
Right.
And it certainly doesn't mean that the set of behaviours they've got are going to get them to where they want to get to.
Right. That makes sense to me. There was something, I was talking to a lady yesterday called Wes Kao, who was the exec director of the alt MBA that Seth Godin puts out.
Right, yeah.
And so one of the things she was saying that Seth Godin said to her was, for her particularly, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about, is that you have to draw a bigger box. That, it's
right. That's a really nice way of putting it.
It's a nice way of putting it, isn't it? And sometimes it's a case of the box you think, if you draw a box and you fill it too easily, actually you need to draw a box like it's 10 times the size or whatever.
Yeah, and I would say is the box is equivalent to our behavioural flexibility. How we talk about behavioural flexibility, because in that box you've got lots of different behaviours. And the more you develop, the more options you're going to have.
Yeah. That makes complete sense. So that's from the point of view of the known to the unknown, as it were. I know, being a Maverick, that actually, I do prefer the unknown, and I don't like being tied down, and the word routine sounds boring to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And all that kind of thing. Yeah. But, but I know across kind of do something different, you've helped like a whole ranch of people, hundreds, if not thousands of people. So what are some of the typical kind of do's or routines that you've seen that have helped people move out of chaos and into the known in a way that, doesn't disengage or...
Yeah, well, calmness. Having moments of calm is a great one.
Okay.
So, I mean, we got lots of do's which are about helping people to get into nature. And that doesn't mean, getting into the wilderness. That means maybe sitting on a park bench.
Yep.
And just watching the world go by, and doing nothing.
Oh, that's going to freak a few people out.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, as we were talking about earlier, our mobile phones are an incredible, how often do you see somebody just doing nothing?
Very rarely.
You're sitting in a meeting, or you're in a cafe and somebody goes off to the loo. What do people do? They get their phone out.
I've never done that, Ray. I'm lying through my teeth, of course, every single time.
Yeah. So, but just do nothing. Just watch the world go by. Do nothing. And it's incredible how beneficial that can be every so often.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got to build it into your routines. I built it into a routine. For me, as I said, I play beach volleyball and I walk there now. And it doesn't matter what the weather is, because of course I used to make incredible excuses that the weather, or I'd run out of time, but now I just build it into my routine. I walk there and it takes me 40 minutes to walk there and it takes me 40 minutes to walk back, but it's great because it serves as some sort of warm up for me, and I get to see the world go by. Whereas even if I cycle or drive, it doesn't take me very long, but I'm having to concentrate more than when I'm walking. It just slows everything down.
Right.
So, swapping a journey from using transport to walking, brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you've done there essentially is designed a new habit.
Exactly.
So, and a lot of this is, as you said, from the small steps. I know that obviously, from your point of view with the small steps and the do's, it's really about creating change through creating habits, isn't it? Or breaking habits.
Yeah, it's about a combination of breaking and forming habits. It's really, the way I like to see it is I think that, as human beings, we've got a capacity for a certain number of habits. And, let's throw out a few bad ones and bring in a few good ones.
Yeah. I love that. So what are some of the, you were talking about, you were in chaos, so you had to bring in some routine. So that's some of the creating habits and the walking thing. What were some of the habits that you threw out to bring yourself back into a sense of balance?
Well, the one that I'm experimenting with at the moment, in fact, I'm trying to get my whole family to experiment with this at the moment, is I bought a charger that sits downstairs. It's got 5 leads into it. I've got 3 kids and my wife, and I'm desperately trying to get them to leave their phones there.
Right.
Buy alarm. We've bought. Everyone's got an alarm clock now. An old-fashioned alarm clock.
Right.
Plug the phone in downstairs so that I don't do my emails. Sit in bed in the morning, on my mobile phone. I get up, and it's so much better. So much better. I haven't managed to persuade my 15-year-old daughter to do this yet, but we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll come back and tell you.
Okay, sounds great. I'll look forward to that. And it's funny, isn't it? Because it sounds like such a simple thing, and yet that's the thing. It's the small things that trip us up, isn't it?
And you can't imagine what the consequences of doing that are.
Yeah.
I can't tell you now, what they'll be for you. They'll be different than they are for me. But the law of unintended consequences is incredible. You do something and you can try and imagine what will happen, but you can't. Particularly if you build it into a routine. You're, on the walking instead of cycling or driving, you bump into people you haven't seen for a while.
Yeah.
You have a conversation. You arrange to meet up for a coffee, and something will happen that wouldn't have happened. You couldn't have predicted what would happen.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, don't try and imagine what will happen as a result of doing something different. Just have a bit of faith that it will be positive, and and experiment.
I totally get that. I think, I guess, one of the questions I would have, and again, I think this is why the small steps, the do's help. I guess it's that risk aversion thing. We have many of our listeners are Mavericks at heart, but maybe not Mavericks in behaviour, as it were. So, because there is there's the bills to pay, there's the mortgage to pay, there are millions of things pulling at their, and I think, we all go through phases of that, right? So, thinking about your three areas, what are the kind of the levers that they could be pulling in order to start creating change? So in terms of what would personal responsibility look like there, what would alignment look like?
Yeah, I mean, those three things are all really part of the same ethos. It really is just about, it's about understanding that it's you that's in charge. You're the only one, that matters in a way, because if you don't look after yourself, you certainly can't look after other people.
Right. The old oxygen mask analogy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's really about experimenting with your personality, saying, okay, if I want different results, I've got to experiment. There's no good changing my thinking. I've got to change how I behave. And maybe a good place to start is with my behavior, and behavior is maybe a word that sounds quite negative to some people, because you remember from school, you've got
behave yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's not quite like that. It's just experimenting with your personality, and just seeing what happens. That's really, really what it's down to. And if the experiment doesn't work for you, fine. That's okay. But the only thing I can say is unless you're daft, it's not going to harm you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, I really like that notion of experimentation. Do it as an experiment, because, as you say, at the end of the day, what have you got to lose?
Yeah, and it's fascinating.
Yeah,
it's really interesting to experiment with your own personality. As I said, my movement is in the direction of the known at the moment.
Yeah.
And maybe it will swing back another time. I don't know. But I don't like doing, paying the bills, and I don't like doing things that I've done 100 times before. But then you suddenly go, well, okay, I could design this in a way. I could design this into my routine, and maybe it's also an opportunity to listen to music.
Yeah.
And there's probably, so, okay, I'm going to set aside an hour once a month on a Tuesday evening, and I'm going to do all those awful boring jobs that I know I've got to do. But I'll tell you what, I'll ask the kids for a recommendation of music I should listen to. It makes it fun.
Yeah.
It makes it, you've got something to talk to your kids about, it gets a conversation going. You can turn what seems like a dull thing into a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is about that, finding that thing that takes whatever the opposite side of you is, so known or unknown, and finding, so in your example there about music, there's an unknown element to that, because you're asking your kids for the novelty and the risk and all that. But I guess also for someone in the known who doesn't necessarily love risks, there's almost that kind of, how can you make it a little bit safer, a little bit more known, without being completely crippled by your comfort zone?
Yeah, I mean, that would work for those people whose preference is the known. They can do, they like doing, the routine things that maybe you and I would not like, but they could ask for a recommendation for new music to listen to. There's no risk involved in that.
No.
If you believe there's a risk involved in that, then you probably shouldn't be talking to us. There's somebody else you should be talking to. But I'm not poo-pooing it. It is difficult. Some people don't. They like to. I mean, I've got friends who, they will listen to the same music they listened to when we were 20.
Interesting.
And it's not a risk to listen to other music. There's an opportunity cost. They don't get listened to the same In Excess album they've listened to, God knows how many times.
From 1987.
Yeah, exactly. So, but, is that really a risk? No.
No, absolutely. So you've talked a lot about kind of how people thrive and all that. So on the assumption here that one of our Mavericks, or indeed anyone, is kind of taking those three points and they're starting to do something different, then, as we know, no person is a castle. Everyone exists within a social circle or that kind of stuff. What's kind of like the impact of other people here in terms of, I guess some people might be worried about how they look, but also if people start doing things differently, that can, a lot of people want us to stay exactly as we are, don't they? So tell us a little bit about the relationship with other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's two elements, and they're really important elements. The first one is that, yes, in most cases, the people around you will want you to continue behaving in the way you've behaved in the past, because that's the known for them.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's worth bearing that in mind. They're not thinking about you when they do that. They're thinking about them.
Yeah.
And the impact it will have on them. Because if you start exercising, or you stop going to the pub, or you start to behave more assertively, it's gonna hold up a bit of a mirror to them.
Yeah.
And that's not something that they necessarily enjoy.
Yeah.
So it's worth bearing that in mind.
Yep.
The second thing is that when you start to behave differently, they will be forced to behave differently themselves.
Yeah, of course.
And that I would hope will be a positive thing for them. They might not like it at first. We've had husbands come in who have recommended a program to their wives.
Yep.
And then come into the office when we were running a program in a community centre, actually, and complain that dinner wasn't on the table at 6:30 like it was normally. And then they were very agitated about it.
Yeah.
Of course, Renal, who was running the program, signed them up for a program, and everything was fine. But it can cause issues.
Yeah.
But I think probably overall the thing I'd remember is that you're not actually that important to other people. They sometimes notice, but mostly people don't notice when you're behaving differently.
Right. Yeah.
It's amazing what you can get away with. You can be very, very conscious. I mean, it's really borne out to me when we have a wear something different program.
Yeah.
And it's really about using what you wear to get out of your comfort zone. And it was, for me, the hardest program I've done, and
really?
One of the do's was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was about flipping your clothing. And so instead of wearing my normal jeans and a smart shirt, I wore a suit and a t-shirt. So I swapped the smart and the casual around.
Yeah.
And I went to a meeting, a large corporate, feeling so conscious of what I was wearing because I was wearing a suit and a t-shirt. And I never, ever, ever wear a suit and a t-shirt, and nobody, not even my colleagues, noticed.
How funny.
But I was so self-conscious.
Yeah.
And it really, really highlighted to me that whilst I think I'm behaving, acting, wearing something different, actually, I'm not that important to other people. So don't be afraid, because the chances are people won't really notice.
Yeah. It makes complete sense. And you're right. Most people are just inherently self-interested, aren't they? So even if they're very close to you, so say your wife or whatever, or my other half, it's notice of us to the degree that it affects them.
Yes, that's exactly right. They don't necessarily know. I mean, some people are more observant than others, and they will notice if you're wearing something different. But you'd be surprised. Most people don't. And they are interested in them. You should be interested in yourself. You should, try and look after yourself. Because if you don't look after yourself, as we said earlier, it's impossible to look after other people. But if you remember that, then that gives you much more freedom to experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a couple more questions before we wrap this. If you had to kind of give us a headline or a bottom line as to everything we've spoken about, and in terms of a Maverick really doing something, really thriving, what would be your kind of your summing up, as it were?
I suppose I'd say don't take yourself too seriously. You've got an incredible ability to flex yourself, and your behaviors and your personality, whatever way you want to put it. You've got this amazing ability to flex, and people won't notice. You will. The consequences will be positive, is my guess. And it can be huge fun. Once you get into the swing of it, it can be huge fun. And sometimes the things that you really don't think you'll enjoy, you really enjoy. Right. I really, really enjoyed organising my record collection the other day. I never thought that would ever happen.
Do you know what? I cleared out my bookshelf last weekend and I thoroughly loved it.
There you go.
Loved it. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Love that. So, just tell us, I know you've got some really interesting developments coming up at Do Something Different. Tell us about what's coming up for you. What's next in the hopper?
Two things that are really exciting me at the moment. One is we have a new app. It's going to be launched fairly soon, very soon. Joao, if you're listening. And that's a really, we've taken all the learnings we've taken over the last 7 years or so, and they're going to be in the new app.
Awesome.
So that's going to be interesting to see how well that works. And secondly, we'll be piloting Do Something Different vouchers, which is the first time that people have the opportunity, or employers initially will have the opportunity to pay for their staff to embrace experiences which cost a bit of money.
Yeah.
So it might be as simple as going for a coffee with somebody that you don't normally go for a coffee with, and the employer can pay for that. It might be doing some meditation. It might be having a massage, or it could be any number of different things, but it's experiences that we'll encourage people to do all the things that we know work and help people's well-being. So getting into nature, but employees will be able to look through our directory of opportunities and see what they want to spend their credits on that their employers made available to them, and that process will improve their well-being.
Awesome. I love that, and that definitely will help. I know you're on a bit of a mission to kind of de-stress Mavericks and other people who are the creatives and unknowns of this world. So there's no doubt that's going to help.
I'm on a quest to de-stress myself as much as anyone. So, and if that helps others, then fantastic.
I love that. So, Ray, thank you so much for your time today. I think there's been so much richness there around, really how, as a Maverick, or indeed just any human being, how to thrive, how to flex, what's needed. And there's just a lot of richness there. So thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your insight. And thank you for spending time with us today. So that was Mr. Ray Richards. And for me, looking back, there were probably 3 big takeaways. And they're really around the behavioural flexibility that Ray spoke about. The first part of that was taking personal responsibility. The fact that basically no one can make a change for us. We have to take responsibility ourselves. The second part was aligning beliefs and behaviour, and that is that we actually have to do something. We can't think our way to a new way of acting, but we can act our way to a new way of thinking. And the third piece for me was that piece around embracing both the known and the unknown. As a Maverick, I'm undoubtedly much more comfortable with the unknown, but routines which I could consider really boring are actually really good for me. And when I do that and I embrace something different, then the law of unintended consequences can cut in. But I'm really curious as to what you're taking from this episode. So, head on over to maverickunlimited.com/podcast and leave us a message to tell us not only what you're taking from this, but also how you're going to apply it. Finally, if you're a Maverick entrepreneur or leader who really does want to live life on your terms and make your own rules, be sure to head over to maverickunlimited.com and sign up for our free ebook. It's called Superpowers Aren't Just for Superheroes, and it's all about creating life on your own terms using your signature strengths. With that, thanks for listening to the Mavericks Unlimited podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.